Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome. So I'm trying something a little bit different today in that I'm recording the podcast, but I'm also doing the podcast live on TikTok. So, hi, TikTok. I hope you guys are all doing well. So, I'm going to be looking at my notes and I'll try to glance over and look at some of the questions that may come up on TikTok. And it's been a little bit since I have done a podcast, but I'm super excited to be back recording one today. And I missed talking to all of you guys about narcissism, narcissistic abuse, and all things related to that and abuse. So today I thought I would do an episode on something that I've been thinking about for a while. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about is subtle forms of abuse that people may not recognize as maybe, or subtle forms of abusive or violent behavior that people may not recognize as being violent or abusive. And again, hello to all of you that are joining in the room. So some of the red flags that I want to talk about are things that, from a distance, if we see it on the news or if we maybe hear about it secondhand from someone, that we may think about it as like definitely a red flag. But when we're in that relationship bubble, we may not see it as a red flag, or it just may sort of go over our heads because a lot of times it's more difficult to notice things when we're inside that love bubble with someone, or when we feel like, oh, this person is my world and my everything. And so you may miss some of these things. So the number one red flag that I want to talk about is someone who has an affinity or a love for weapons, right? They're just an avid collector of weapons, and they may every now and then sort of lay those weapons out in front of you or make sure that you notice that they collect weapons, right? And I think that's where the red flag comes in, because they want you to know what they're capable of. They're also an enthusiast. So a lot of times, and this isn't applied to everyone, but a lot of times people who are gun enthusiasts, knife or exotic weapons enthusiasts, they don't necessarily see anything wrong with violence, or they normalize violence. And this includes people that have weapons as part of their job. So, I worked with correctional officers. So, correctional officers, police officers, military people, all sorts of people that may collect weapons as part of their jobs, but they may go above and beyond what their job requirements are and just have this whole arsenal of weapons. So I think anytime that you have weapons and you have someone that is prone to extreme anger or violence, that is always something that you want to be on high alert for. Um, Someone who makes, number two would be someone who makes veiled threats against you or themselves. So a veiled threat would be something like, if you break up with me, I'm gonna, well, this may not be so veiled, but if you break up with me, I'm gonna kill myself. Or if you break up with me, or if you don't give me what I want, I'm gonna leak all of your private photos onto the internet. Or, another form that's, I'm sure a lot of people have heard is that if I can't have you, no one can have you. That would be another example of like a veiled threat. So people that are used to threatening or hostile behavior, or just sort of want to take control of the emotional atmosphere in the relationship, always be on the lookout for people like that. That is such a huge red flag. Number three, someone who begins to develop very right winged, extremist religious beliefs. Right wing extreme religious beliefs would be something like, I can start my own cult. I am your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and people should follow me. But someone who says that that they could lead a cult, or that you should view them as God, or something like that, would be a right wing religious beliefs. Or someone who believes that they have to start a community elsewhere, and that they will be the religious leader of that community, and that you should follow them and serve them because they get to make all decisions over you and the relationships and things like that. Okay, so number four would be, and I think this happens a lot more that I've seen with women than I've seen it happen with men. But women especially are prone to copying you. So when you think about women who want to copy how you look, what you're doing in your career, your dating practices, your romantic practices, everything that they see you doing, they kind of want to take on your identity. So again, and I think I've mentioned this before. I don't know if you guys, I don't know how old people are that watch me on TikTok, but I know some of my viewers, a lot of my viewers on my YouTube channel are younger generation. So there's a movie that came out, I believe it was the 80s or 90s, a movie called Single White Female. And it was essentially about this woman who put in this ad for the paper looking for a roommate. So she got one, and this girl essentially copied her down to the T, got her same haircut and all of this kind of stuff. And at first, it started off great. They were friends. But then this girl eventually wanted to, basically take on this girl's life. And when she wanted to take on her life, she wanted to basically eliminate or eradicate her from her own life. So she wanted to basically take on her identity. She was trying to, and I think she might have even done it, slept with her boyfriend. It's been many years since I've done that. But if you have someone that's like gunning for your romantic partner, gunning to be a part of your family, and they're just very consumed with you and your identity and copying it down to the T because they want the same results for themselves, or they're just enamored with the validation or the attention that you get, and so they want that for themselves. That is something to be extremely alarmed about, because that means that one, that person doesn't have their own personality, but two, they don't think very highly of you. And three, they're comfortable with, just sort of crossing boundaries and, just taking on parts of you and aspects of you, and that they're very much obsessed with you. And so, that is something to be on the lookout for. Number five would be a narcissistic person who is very comfortable with arguing and yelling, particularly at you, and even swearing at you in public. And I think I think this kind of speaks for itself, because if someone's willing to act this way in public and degrade or berate you in public, just imagine what's going on behind closed doors. And I think a great example of this would be like reality television shows, when you see like these husbands and wives or partners that get involved in these arguments, and someone just cuts way below the belt all the way down to the white meat. And you see it on television all the time, and it's like, oh, if that person is speaking to her or him like that in public, you can imagine what goes on behind closed doors when there's no cameras or there's no outside witnesses to observe, right? I believe that the filter comes completely off, and things might even get a little bit physical. um Number six, I would say being someone who's very comfortable enough, very comfortable to do a smear campaign against you. And I think a lot of times when we think about smear campaigns, we think about someone who's just, smutting up, um, our reputation or talking badly about us to other people. Smear campaigns are not always so obvious, right? And I'll use myself as an example. I mean, many years ago, when I was in my 20s, I used to have a male friend that I used to work with, and I would, I thought we were close. Our families knew each other, and so on and so forth. Um, and so he knew a lot about, like, people that I was dating and things like that. And I would share with him because I thought we were friends. And lo and behold, behind my back, he would secretly sabotage the people that I was dating by going to tell them things that weren't true, right? And he had done this a number of times, unbeknownst to me, because he's a guy, so he's going to talk to other men, and he's sort of, trying to spew negative, untrue, and false information to deter men from wanting to date me. And I found out, later on down the line when someone was asking me about it, and I think like something that he said or something like that. And so immediately I ended that friendship because it was way over the line. And so a lot of times people will go to people that you're dating or maybe even family members under the guise that we already know each other. We already have an established rapport, and I'm just a concerned person. And so I want to share things. And before you know it, they're sort of sharing things about you. And then, those things are completely inappropriate or they're boundary violations and things like that. And then it can become more overt, but a lot of times it can be covert under the guise that I'm just concerned about you, or we're just mutual friends that know each other. Our my mutual friends are her mutual friends, and blah blah blah. And so we can talk and we can have these casual conversations. And if something that I'm not supposed to share happens to slip out, Natalie won't mind or whatever, or she'll forgive me, right? It's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission, that kind of mentality. And this happens a lot too with families, with siblings and parents and things like that, where people just blur the lines. And before you know it, they're sharing a lot of your personal information with each other, things that, just are boundary violations or crossing the lines. Um, and then, okay, so, and then, I think the other part of that, which is what I had experienced to a certain degree, is that, when you have this friend or this family member that's sharing your personal information, it can be an interesting phenomenon too, because you sort of learn a lot about the other people that they're sharing information with, or they're smearing your name to, is because a lot of times, sometimes those people will also too keep that secret or not share what's being shared with them, not share with you what's being shared about you to them, if that makes sense. And so I think that creates another phenomenon with the other set of people as well, where they now are privy to information that you didn't know about, but they kind of go along with it. They don't tell you, like, hey, this person is being disrespectful or whatever. They keep that secret, with them. Okay, number 7 is stalking. And again, stalking doesn't have to start out as like overt behavior. It could be very covert, where, I think a lot of people refer to this now as like monitoring spirits, where you have like friends, family members, peers, or whatever that sort of monitor you online, but they don't interact, they don't engage, they don't really show support. They're just, they're just basically just monitoring everything that you're doing. And they may ask you about it at a certain point or say, hey, I noticed this and that, but they never actually show support. So that would be an example of like covert stalking. Like every time that you're posting something, every time that you're sharing something, they may do it from a fake account where they're sort of monitoring everything that you're doing. They're looking at everything, or they're very consumed with it, and they are usually the first ones that are clocked into all of your tea, right? But they never show support, and so they're just constantly monitoring everything that you're doing. And I think that's a huge red flag when you have people that are just so consumed with your life and what you're doing, and they're not doing it from a supportive stance, but more like, I just want to be nosy and see what he or she's got going on. And I feel entitled to know your information. And you can always tell when someone feels entitled to know your information when they start asking you about things that are private or things that you didn't share, and becoming upset when that information is not shared with them because they are so engrossed with it, and now they feel so obsessed and they start to feel possessive over having access to all parts of you that they don't know. They don't feel like it's inappropriate, that they're crossing the lines or the boundaries of that. Um, so hopefully that makes sense. Number 8 is when people are in competition with you. This could be lovers. This could definitely be friends. This can even be parents and siblings. But people become so consumed with you and what you're doing, and they're trying to one up you or even sabotage you in some way because they're so jealous with envy. And envy or jealousy are two different things. Jealousy is like, oh, someone's doing something and I covet that or I desire that for myself too. And I'm a little peeved that maybe I haven't gotten there yet. And those kinds of feelings are understandable. Envy, it goes beyond coveting or wanting something that someone else has for yourself. Is like, no, I want that for myself and I don't want you to have it. And I'm willing to go to extremes to make sure that you don't have it. And so envy can be very dangerous, I think, for a lot of people, but especially when you get to be when people are in competitions, and a lot of times that goes unnoticed, that people are privately competing with you, or they're agreeing with envy with anything that you got going on. And these people can even be more successful than you, have more finances than you, be better looking than you. But it's just the fact that you have something, they want it, and they also don't think that you deserve to have it. And so that's when you can start to see people get really mean or start to sabotage. So an example of this would be Nancy Kerrigan and Tanya Harding in figure skating all those years ago. Um, when she injured her knee, that could be something, that, or even just going back to my earlier example where I had a male friend that was sort of going around and talking to the other men that I was dating and trying to smear me. That is an example of someone who coveted me for himself, never really shared that, but was also willing to sabotage other relationships that I was in, and didn't care. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about the ramifications, the fallout, or any of that stuff. They just wanted what they wanted. Um, Number 9, I think, when someone puts the onus of the relationship on you. So the communication and the connection, all of the responsibilities that come with that onto you. So, for example, you have people that never want to reach out and initiate things. They never initiate talking about problems. They never initiate just basic communication like getting together for lunch. So for you will never see or hear from them if you are not the person who is doing all of the work in the relationship, and they don't see anything wrong with that, and they don't make any effort to change or improve that. So anytime you have someone that puts the the onus of all the communication and all the work of the relationship on you. Huge red flag, because that automatically means that relationship is one-sided and they have no intention or desire to change the dynamic of that relationship. And number 10, and I think this is one that we're starting to see more and more, especially in modern day dating, where someone talks about sex very early on or very inappropriately in the dating relationship, or just in the context of your relationship. It may not even be dating, it might even be a friendship. So an example of talking about sex inappropriately would be like, if you're dating someone and they're, the children, either your children or his children or whatever, are in the room, and that person is all of a sudden like, oh, I'm horny and I want to have sex now. And, you have to be mindful that there's children in the room. Like, this conversation right now is inappropriate. Or maybe you're talking about, you're on your first or second date, and all of a sudden that person talks about, what do you like to do sexually, or things like that, where they're just sort of inappropriately rushing into those conversations early on. We don't even know each other well enough yet for us to be having those types of conversations, but that person feels so comfortable talking with you about that, right? And there's no filter, and they expect for you to have that conversation with you. And especially if people are like, I'm not going to take you out to dinner, but then I want to start having that conversation. And it might not even be the second date, it might be upon the first meeting, it might be in the chat. Especially if you guys are online dating, it might just be in the chat on the online dating, where you guys haven't even had a phone call or anything yet now. And so I think that's an example of people that are inappropriate. So I hope that that helps. So that's that for that episode of the podcast.